Okay, everybody, welcome to whatever the hell this is. As per usual, Samson Folk talking to you guys, ladies and gentlemen, theys and thems, about basketball, about the Toronto Raptors. And here we are, Friday afternoon. Thanks to everybody for popping in. Um, Never know how to start a live stream because this has to come out as a podcast. I guess I can cut out the unimportant stuff. But hello, thank you everybody for coming in and listening to this. I'm Samson Folk. Let's talk about basketball. Let's talk about the Toronto Raptors. And so I've obviously put out a tweet asking for questions, mailbag questions that I will answer. We're talking about Gradey Dick's ceiling. Is there stardom there? All-star status. We're talking about Jakob Poeltl as a two-way player, but is it veering towards one side? What are the Raptors doing defensively? I have a lot of numbers. I have a lot of contextual play type stuff, and I'm very excited to present the Jakob Poeltl stuff because there's a lot of really interesting things here. And we're just basically talking about the Raptors at large. Let's get into it. So, from Spain PNR, the most fun tank of all time, which is obviously a fun name, good name. Quote, any info you could provide on Jakob Poeltl's rim protection stats this year, contest percentage, rim field goal percentage allowed, rim shots allowed per 100 compared to his heights in San Antonio in 2021 and 2022. Also, is he clearly a better offensive player than defensive player at this point? Okay, this is a great question because the big stats, are completely contradicting each other right now. The Jakob Poeltl stuff is really interesting and requires you to go a little bit deeper than just the numbers. And I will say exactly why that is so I'll just get into it quickly. So Jakob is a fairly big positive contesting shots at the rim this season when he does contest them. And he's second per NBA.com's tracking stats. He's second in the NBA at volume of contesting shots within 6 feet. He's only behind Chet Holmgren. He's contesting a lot of shots at the rim. Okay, he's second. Now, he's defending those shots pretty well. Teams are shooting 6% worse than the expected field goal percentage league wide when Jakob is there. So, high volume of contests for Jakob, high efficiency of stopping shots, let's say. That indicates good things, right? That's all great. However, there's a strange thing happening at the same time where the Raptors defense is much worse when Jakob is on the court. They allow teams to shoot much better at the rim when he's on the court, and teams shoot at the rim more often when he's on the court. Why is this happening? Why is Jakob Poeltl the second most voluminous contester at the rim, an effective contester at the rim, and then somehow teams are shooting better when he's out there and more often when he's out there? Doesn't seem to make sense. We have to get into what the Raptors are doing defensively. And also, I'll say, before Scotty got injured, Scotty was sixth in the NBA in rim contests, and he was allowing 44% on those, which is insanely good and is basically close to Wembanyama as far as like efficacy. Um, Tracking stats can be wonky though. I went back and watched a bunch of Jakob's pick and roll possessions just to try and make sense of this. And so, but to say all of this, the Raptors have 9 guys on their roster who, according to tracking data, positively contest within 6 feet. They have 7 who are negatives. The positives also have higher volume. They contest more shots. Why are the Raptors a negative defending the rim team if this is the case, right? Scotty Barnes, second most voluminous on the team through 4 games. He contested a bunch. 6th in the NBA per game. He is allowing 44%. Huge. Jakob's second in the NBA, the whole league at contesting. He's allowing 6% better than what is expected. You have guys like Mobo. You have like everybody's contesting well, the high volume guys. And the Raptors somehow come out on the other end. So here is the rub. All the setup, here's the rub. Tracking data can be wonky, and that much is certain. Like, The Raptors allow a bunch of stuff well, we'll explain why. So, the Raptors allow a bunch of shots at the rim, higher than expected or a decent amount across the NBA. Why? Because they're playing really higher pickup points, ball pressure defense. When you go play ball pressure defense, what is happening? You're typically riding a guy's hip. You're typically playing more aggressive on ball. You're allowing him, in more cases than not, a step to get downhill. This is why on media day, I asked Jakob about his role and Scotty about his role as far as their job at the bottom of the defense when there is so much ball pressure up ahead, because those two things are inextricably linked. Guys pressure the ball, drives will come downhill, other teams will shoot at the rim a lot. The Raptors are allowing a lot at the rim. Teams are scoring pretty efficiently there. Both Jakob and Scotty didn't really want to answer that, which is fine. That's their prerogative. However, I went back to watch a lot of the pick and roll coverage, and Jakob is basically playing drop. Every once in a while, he'll step up to the level. Every once in a while, they'll get him to blitz, but he's basically playing drop defense. And what this means is similar to the start of last season, too. Jakob isn't always able to contain. Not always. Guys can get around him. And also, the really aggressive coverage at the front end means that the Raptors are playing lock and trail. They're climbing over screens. And it also means that, guess what? There are 2-on-1s. And the very best players in the NBA defensively can blanket two players at once when they're playing drop. We see Rudy Gobert do it all the time. It took absolute wizardry from Luka Doncic to undo what Rudy was able to do defensively. And the Wolves were still much better in that series with Gobert on the floor. Jakob, for all of the good contests at the rim, is having trouble navigating those 2-on-1 situations. And the Raptors' ball pressure defense is putting them in 1-on-2 situations repeatedly. Jakob is having trouble with that, and that's the difference. That really is the difference. AG asks, is there fluky stuff with opposition three-point percentage with Yak's defensive on-offs? No, there isn't. That's why it's interesting, right? It's not like Pascal Siakam, for example, on the Pacers right now. There's a huge swing in three-point percentage. Like the defense, the Pacers are better with Pascal on the floor defensively, but to the degree that we're seeing in the on-offs is a bit of a fluke in three-point shooting. With Jakob, that isn't the case. There isn't a big swing there. And to go back to this, Jakob isn't like saving everybody. And in some cases, he's just allowing, like, he's not contesting the shot. The shot is just going up. He's not getting over there for the contest. So as far as Jakob's efficacy as a drop defender, Jakob's efficacy as like the low man, when he engages, it's been quite good. When he is, let's say, a little bit like, I'm not going to make it over there for this one, then it isn't. And you can understand some of that too, because if Jakob leaves his man, the Raptors aren't really that impressive at helping to pick up on the, I would say, rebounding side of things. Tim Waring brings up the exact point I was going to talk about next. What are Mobo's defensive stats like compared to Jakob, since they're rarely on the floor at the same time? Here is the rub. Perfect question, Tim. Mobo is the highest positive as far as on-offs for the Raptors defensively and in general. They are 22 points better. 22 points better with Mobo on the floor. Why is this the case? Because the Raptors do not change their ball pressure decisions, their ball pressure ethos when Mobo is out on the floor. However, Mobo plays switch defense. When Mobo is out there, you're not seeing a huge change in like big swings of three-point efficacy. You're not seeing anything like that. But what you are seeing is a little percentage of every single quadrant on the floor, whether it's, at the rim, short mid-range, long mid-range, or three-pointers, from rim, from short mid-range, from three-pointers. All of those, the frequency that other teams shoot at when Jakob is on the floor, that gets funneled into the long mid-range when Mobo is out there. Why is this happening? Because when the Raptors play their ball pressure defense, they let Mobo switch. Jakob is not switching. Jakob is being put in these one-on-two situations that he is having trouble winning. And he's also very closely linked to Gradey Dick's minutes on the court, which is, worth saying. All this to say, Mo gets to switch out. Mobo is keeping the ball above the break. He is playing contain. He is not allowing these driving lanes to get deep to make passes so you get side action for open threes. He's not letting guys get drives to the rim, not necessarily because he's a better defender than Poeltl. However, in this scheme, he's a much better fit and he's getting to shine. And also, I know he's injured right now, but just to highlight, like, as far as what Mobo has been able to do as an isolation defender has been really, really impressive. Blake Murphy says 95th percentile on-off impact on opponent turnover rate with Mobo too. Exactly. Jumping guys, getting out. He's also very active as a low man when he's not involved in the action. Great sense of where to be, what to do. So that's awesome. And I don't want to I don't want to be too hard on Jakob. I'm just trying to explain what's happening because in the measurables where Jakob is quote unquote doing what he's supposed to do, he is doing what he's supposed to do. And then you could B-ball index had Jakob as one of the top 10 isolation defenders in the NBA, but that also had, I'm pretty sure that also had Austin Reeves on it. It had Gary Trent Jr. on it. So these things always contradict and there's a lot of stuff going on. But as far as I can tell, Jakob has been positive in his own capacity, but the Raptors are playing a defensive scheme that removes Jakob from where he can affect the game constantly. And Mobo slides into that scheme perfectly. That's why we're seeing such a big difference. And the second part of this question, which I'm gone very, very long on, is Jakob better on offense now than he is on defense? I think so. Jakob is not only second in the NBA in how many shots he contests within 6 feet at the rim, but he's also second in the NBA at screen assists. He is also inextricably tied to RJ Barrett's leap and Gradey Dick's leap. Both of those guys are extremely dependent on getting freed off of screens. There's another question that was asking about how much the Raptors are doing off ball. And I have a really great video essay coming out tomorrow about Gradey Dick that has just chock full of fun proprietary stats that I won't give away right now. But I will say that it's been updated. He's currently first in the NBA, Gradey, as the cutter of off-ball screens at 177. Second in the NBA, Norman Powell, which I had a tweet about Norman and Gary that had, I think, positive responses, but some negative responses as well. However, Jakob is just carving out gobs of space for so many people. Sandra says, damn, Masai really said we got OG at home. Yeah, Mobo has been really, really impressive. And the thing is, too, is they're different and forgive me, this is going to be nerdy stuff, but OG is a guy who covers so much space and takes huge steps. And he was a huge proponent of the jump stop closeout because he'd cover big space, then he'd use his big steps to cover space, and he'd get his arms in a bunch of places. He'd just be in the way, and he's so strong that you can't turn him like a turnstile. And that was OG. And Mobo has these little ballerina feet, and he's big like OG. He's actually, maybe he's even smaller, right? So as far as anyway, they're both big relative to what they're asked to do defensively, which is switch out on guys, lock down in isolation. And so we have Mobo, who's doing it differently than OG, with these twinkle toes feet where he's switching hips, flipping them, getting his feet, getting slinky around screens, and his hands are so active. He got into trouble the last couple of games, putting his hands in the cookie jar. But man, Mobo has been awesome. That's the Jakob defense portion, I think. And yeah, so anyway, back to the point about, is Jakob better on offense now than he is on defense? I think so. And some of that is contextual. As I laid out, Jakob is not being helped in the slightest by the Raptors' defensive context, the scheme they're running. However, Offensively, it's the inverse. They are gassing his numbers. He is being put in so many different positions as a playmaker. He's being put in so many different positions as a roll man, as a screener. He basically just gets to go out there and like rock out. And this is similar to what San Antonio did with him, where they ran so much delay action. They ran a lot of dribble handoffs with like Doug McDermott and Jakob Poeltl and DeMar DeRozan back in the day too, right? Like where they're trying to carve out swaths of room for these guys. So anyway, Jakob has been integral as the hub for so much of what the Raptors like to run. He's been, completely informative in how they play their offense, in carving out that space for their most talented offensive players over the course of the start of the season in both Gradey Dick and RJ Barrett. And once IQ and once Scotty come back, that stuff will start to be present as well. It's just like a bunch of great stuff has been happening with Jakob offensively. And while the turnovers have been like, I don't know, a little bit high, like he's the 11th percentile in his turnover rate, 19.3%. That's the highest it's ever been in his career. He's being asked to make riskier passes. He's being asked to dribble a little bit more often. That's going to come along with it. But, his assist percentage, 12.1%. That's nice. His points per shot attempt, almost 124 or 1.24, let's say. It's just like, it's been good. And I do think at this point in time that Jakob is a better offensive player than he is a defensive player. However, he's on this team for a few more years, contract-wise. The Raptors can also, depending on how things shake out with their defense, what it looks like once guys come back, they can maybe allow Jakob to succeed in a more conservative role, which it seems like his skill set would thrive within. That is why I'd been a huge proponent of pushing back on the like Nicholas Claxton stuff, because Nicholas Claxton can do some of what Mobo is doing now defensively, but he can't do any of the stuff that Jakob is doing offensively. And I think having Jakob there to facilitate the type of offense that Darko wants to run, there it is. That's what we really want to see. Blake Murphy says Garrett Temple has the best predictive defensive EPM on the roster right now. Simply not playing for the number 29 defense is great for your metrics. Yeah, that's awesome. On off, like the catch-all numbers are so great. You can always find such interesting stuff in there. Okay. I'm going to, for the first time, share my screen, and we're going to talk about a play. And it is the skip, slip, zoom play, the Dan Hurley play out of UConn. This is a question from Caitlin Cooper, because obviously Twitter has kind of been very excited. This clip, every time it runs, it gets clipped. People talk about like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? There's so much happening with this Raptors offense. Grady's coming out of the corner. He's swinging into a whole bunch of spots. Blake says, don't Fred Katz this. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I don't want to give away like a password or anything like that. I don't know what Fred Katz did. My apologies to Fred. Or how dare you, Fred? Whatever the response is supposed to be. However, Caitlin asked me about what I thought was the best outcome for this play. So this is kind of what we're looking at. Okay, let's see. We're going to press present. We're going to share screen. Let's get into it. Okay. And the NBA, I swear to the Lord, NBA, this is copyright. Like this, I understand, but this is fair use. This is transformative in nature. And also to the podcast listeners afterwards, my apologies. But this play was made famous, as you can see Evan here, by Dan Hurley at UConn. When I asked Darko about this play, because they ran it preseason, he said that I'm getting a DM from Blake. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. He said that he picked this up from Dan Hurley, which I was glad to hear. And he also said he watches a ton of basketball, looks for stuff. Every coach does this at every level. You talk to a high school basketball coach, they're going to geek out on you about what they're watching and trying to pick up for. Coaches always do it. However, so Caitlin wanted to know, what is the ideal read on this play?
Being part of that coach.
Everyone who's wondering, this is horns. There's a guy in the corner that you can't see, right? When there's a guy in the corner, when there's a guy at the elbows and a guy up top, this formation is called horns. This is what it's all about. Horns. The Raptors run a ton of stuff out of horns.
Teaching the fundamentals.
A screen. That's a ghosted screen. That's part of it. Then Ochai is going to come off of Scotty's screen. The skip part of this is the skip pass to Jakob, who lifts out of the corner.
Sure, he gets
Jakob catches. In a lot of cases, there would be a handoff from Jakob to Ochai here. Why? Because then Jakob can screen Pritchard and create a 2-on-1 heading towards the basket. Does that mean that Jason Tatum has to step into the play? Yes, probably. Because Al Horford probably can't handle, if this is like instead of Ochai, let's say this is Emmanuel Quickly, that's probably a lot more dangerous, right? You get a 2-on-1 with Horford right there. That's probably going to be really efficient basketball. Tatum has to step in. Maybe that's the case, but then Scotty can cut right down the guts of the defense and get into a very dangerous position, or he can simply space out. This kind of stuff can happen. So Gradey is coming around the wheel here.
That's what he want to get out of his
They don't
team.
hand off there. Gradey comes around.
Excellent point. Here's Gradey on the
But he pulls
pull-up.
up. He makes that shot. Okay. Why is this important? Well, it's not that important, but anyway, not sharing anymore. So how is that, everybody? Yes, entering Samson's tech era. So basically in that play, Gradey gets that handoff and takes a pull-up jumper. This is kind of what we're looking at, right? And ND talks ball. ND is bringing up the other point here, says there was a possession where Jacoby was in place of Ochai in this possession. If the movement shooter ever hits for Jacoby, him being able to hit a grenade corner three would make this more dynamic too. That's correct. There's a grenade DHO in this play, and grenade DHOs were most like the highest frequency team that ever ran it was like the Milwaukee Bucks with Bryn Forbes. They'd sprint him into a corner and be like, go make a shot, because teams are loath to rotate to the corner with a live dribble like that because the baseline and the sideline are doing so much of your work already. But regardless, if you're going to run this full play, this full action, does it make sense to get a pull-up mid-range jumper? And Gradey has been so efficient and so good at hitting pull-up mid-range jumpers. He has. But is that what you're trying to accomplish with a set play? Never. No. Caitlin wanted to know what I thought was the ideal outcome for that play. And she asked around. Evan, if Evan ends up watching this, Evan, please pull this or whatever and give me your response for public consumption. However, I think the best play is the read from Jakob to IQ in the same spot that Ochai is in. And Jacoby, probably you don't want to trust him with that yet. You're using this play, as far as I can tell, like they've ran it, I think, 4 times during the season. As far as I can tell, they're using it to get Gradey into a rhythm, and Jakob is not even really looking at that first handoff opportunity. However, to my eye, that first handoff opportunity is the highest outcome of that play, the best outcome of that play. You could get a wide open corner three. You can get a 2-on-1 going to the basket. And because those are great shots. Those are shots you want to get. That's what we want to see. That's lovely stuff. So to answer Caitlin's question, I think that first handoff is the ideal outcome on that play. However, just because of how, I guess, the Raptors have been hamstrung with injuries, that is not exactly what you're going to be looking for. You want to use it as a means to get Gradey going. Okay. I've been talking a lot. I might take a little drink of water if everyone will allow me a moment. Okay. We're back. All right, got to go find some questions. So there was a question about Gradey, which I think was a good one. It's from Makai Bruce, who is a member of Raptors Republic. He asks, what do you think Gradey's ceiling is? This is such a fun question. And Gradey, I've talked about Gradey so much since he got drafted. Blake is in chat. There's a famous Blue Jays Talk Plus episode, because the Raptor show wasn't ongoing, but Blake, since he works all the damn time, he was doing Blue Jays Talk Plus the same day of the Raptors draft. Before I headed downtown to go to the Raptors Republic draft party, I was on Blue Jays Talk Plus to talk about the Blue Jays and whatever else. And he asked me who I think the Raptors should draft. I said, I love Gradey. I'd love Gradey to be the draft pick. I've talked about Gradey. His ceiling, to make it quick as far as like saying a word, I think there is a star ceiling there. I think that's a distinct possibility. And I'll say why. He's an incredibly diverse shot maker. While he isn't a good playmaker right now, I think the tape belays that it could be. What I heard about Gradey's draft workout with the Raptors and other teams was that his playmaking actually was really impressive. If you watched him at Kansas, a lot of, AG said dead corner plays are, really popular in the NBA. Gradey was playmaking out of dead corners all the time at Kansas. He's just taking shots right now. I think that there's a significant ceiling for him as a shooter, which is obviously we're seeing that 20 points per game on 58% true shooting. He has like a tremendous amount of shot making capability. It's really great. He's been undeniable and unbelievable in that regard. Playmaking, I think, can be there. And defensively, this might come across as a bit too hopeful. However, I think that there is a world where Gradey is a positive on defense. I wrote about this, it was the game where he had the 3 steals and 2 blocks in the first half, 5 stocks in a half. Pretty crazy. But one of the first preseason games that Gradey ever played was against the Washington Wizards in his rookie year, and he was in a weak side zone. Basically, he's responsible because Raptors are rotating to the middle, tagging a roller, that it's Gradey's job to split the difference between 2 players at once and cover that ground. Great. I think it was Kispert, if I remember correctly, cut through the weak side zone. What does that do? It's supposed to drag Gradey into the paint with him so that he can't split the difference anymore and open up a corner 3. This is a scripted cut for many NBA teams. Gradey trailed Kispert into the paint, but still managed to intercept the skip pass to the corner. Why? Because he has more size at the 2 guard than a lot of guys have. If you'll remember that hellish series in 2019 between the Raptors and the 76ers looked like they were impossible to score against, save for the heroics of Kawhi Leonard. Why was this the case? Because the 76ers were massive. Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, and sometimes it's JJ Redick. But that's huge. That's a massive team, and that means they shrink every piece of the court. Fred VanVleet shot like 9% in that playoff series, and then he popped off later, but he couldn't find any room. He ran off the line, he got into the middle of the paint, and then suddenly he found himself surrounded by trees with a canopy. There was nowhere to go. He tried to shoot mid-rangers. He got blocked from behind. Rear-view contests were killing him. And it wasn't just Fred who had trouble there. Norm had trouble there. It's just big teams completely erase everybody except for diverse shot makers who are comfortable going to so many places, which we'll get to the Gradey thing in a little bit. But Gradey has size at the 2. That helps him towards positive numbers or a positive impact on defense a bunch. It's not positive yet. I don't think for a while. He's also predictive in how he plays defense. He gets beat. We see, especially in his coverage where he's like playing against a live dribble, he gets beat. He looks his best when he's predicting and jumping what he thinks is going to happen defensively. And he does it quite often. And he did it from the moment he started playing on the Raptors Summer League team in the summer of 2023. The problem with Gradey currently is he's still young. He's still quite skinny and frail. Like the body is building. Good for you. The work continues, all that kind of stuff. But Gradey, even when he beats guys 2 spots legally, there's a strength differentiate. Like there's a big difference in strength there. And he will get turned like a turnstile. When Gradey is like 24 years old, and he's seen so much of how NBA offenses like to accomplish things, when the body is filled out and he's no longer like a 6'7", 6'8" spindly guy, but he's like a well-built 6'7", 6'8" player, it makes me think that when he's predicting and beating guys to spots, I don't know if the foot speed ever gets great so that he's a good on-ball defender. I don't know. But as an off-ball guy, I think there's a lot of room for him to impact as a guy on digs, as a guy in weak side zone coverages, as a secondary rim protector or tertiary rim protector, let's say. All that kind of stuff can manifest, all of it. That's not a guarantee, but it's a possibility. Now, with all that considered, so we're hearing from me that I think, and this is Kai's question, what is the ceiling? We are hearing that Gradey has potential to be one of the better shot makers in the NBA. I think that much is clear to everybody. There's not a whole bunch of tape on it at the NBA level. Darko said it to S at a practice, however, a couple weeks ago. He said that Gradey is a severely underrated passer. And I typically agree with that. Gradey is a very unique passer. And I think that will manifest and that will show up in stuff later. But currently he's just getting shots up, which is fine. The Raptors, we've seen what this Raptors team is, right? They're just getting shots up. They're doing their thing. I think that he has a roadmap to being an above average passer mixed with being a great shot maker. The handle has to come along to some degree. And I also think the same way that if his body fills out and that could end up being, much better defense, you can also give Gradey, I think, mid-post touches. I'm going to use a name here. Devin Booker is a guy who started getting mid-post touches very early in his career, is also one of the special shot makers in the NBA, and was a much better playmaker than people perceived because for the early part of his career, he was just getting shots up. Also, instrumental in the usage of Devin Booker, implementing the offense that would go on to become very popular for the Suns' offense run to the finals, Darko. Darko was a huge, huge part about what happened with the Suns there, what happened with Devin Booker's usage. I expect, and that's not, Gradey isn't Devin Booker. His first step is not comparable. His pop as a jumper, not comparable. But he can be a facsimile. You can use him in similar situations. So I think he can be a star offensively. And what I said about on the offensive side, the 76ers, the way they're able to squeeze the space defensively, even if Gradey isn't a star, I think given his skill set, he can be one of the players who really pops off in the playoffs. That when you have to be way more adaptable. And, there's a lot of RJ Barrett is not comfortable taking a 16-foot jump shot. And you can see if he gets stuck there on a play, he has to reset or he's probably going to miss. And credit to RJ, who works really hard to keep getting to the rim, to turn those drives from nothing into something. But a guy like Gradey, he can shoot anywhere on the court, and it doesn't really matter to him. He's not better than RJ, but he is very adaptable, both in how willing he is to cut off ball, how willing he is to screen, and he'll take whatever shot is there on the court. That, to me, spells out a player who, when the playoffs come around and there's defensive game plans that shift you around and make you go to places where a lot of players get uncomfortable, Gradey, even if he's not a star, I think will be a guy once it gets to playoff time. There's a lot of shots being made. Running off the screen, my guy Max says, I had a long debate the other day with someone about who was the better shot maker between Tyler Hero and Gradey Dick. I mean, right now, probably Tyler. Tyler also is actually shot maker. They're comparable as shot makers, but Tyler Hero, his manipulation with his handle, he runs the pick and roll way. He's older, but Tyler Hero is a much more accomplished offensive player. Although I think Gradey can be a better defender than Tyler, and I think he will end up being a better shot maker. But right now, I mean, Tyler Hero, his live dribble stuff is really strong. He can shoot anywhere on the court. He has the James Harden floater lob package, and Gradey doesn't have that or anything like that yet. But I was gonna say Tyler Hero is a guy who, once you get to the playoffs, he can pop off. Like that Miami Heat run, they had a different leading scorer for every single series of the playoffs. In the first series, I'm pretty sure it was Goran Dragic. In the second series, it was Bam Adebayo. This is the bubble run. Third series, I think it was Tyler Hero. And in the finals, it was Jimmy Butler. But that was a team that was like, well, there's a lot of guys who can do a lot of things. Like Goran is comfortable in a lot of places. Jimmy's comfortable in a lot of places. Tyler's comfortable in a lot of places. These guys can just, whatever the defensive game plan is throwing at them, they can ratchet up that usage. I think that Gradey will be a guy like that. So this is a very long-winded answer. What do I think Gradey's ceiling is? I think Gradey's ceiling is an all-star. I do. I think it's what Mike Brown said the other day to me, was that he's not Clay, he's not Steph, but he does a lot of what they do. Gradey is number one in the NBA in off-ball screens used. It's because he's so willing to pull and tease the defense in so many ways. He can sprint sideways into a 17-foot jump shot and make it look pure and make it look easy. He can access any part of the floor that he wants. He's 7th. Now I'm kind of, giving away some of the numbers that come out in the video essay tomorrow, but among the high volume NBA players, the guys who have seen more than 60 closeouts, Gradey Dick is 7th in points per chance. 7th. Among the high volume closeout attackers in the NBA, he's one of the best. Ask yourself if people thought that this would be the case for Gradey Dick. Someone like the people who were high on Gradey saw that he always found the top foot while attacking closeouts. They saw that he had a really good knack for it. They thought he would be a good finisher and would make a lot of different types of shots. Yes, but also a lot of people thought he would catch and shoot. That's not Gradey. Gradey will catch, stutter rip, attack your top foot, get you turned sideways, get downhill. He will throw his body at the rim. He does too much stuff too well to not have a star ceiling. Does that mean that he will be a star? No. But we're talking about ceiling here. And Makai, thank you for the question. It basically just gets to be a vehicle for me to say a million different things about Gradey. Oh, long-winded. Kieran Doyle Channel says, do you think Gradey will be better than Hero? Yeah, I do. That's something we're looking at. ND, yeah, I wonder if Gradey ever gets the sidestep 3 going. He really is he is a motion, he's a 2-motion shooter, so he has to be able to control for his own rhythm, getting into sidesteps and stuff like that. It could end up being really good for him. When he catches and he has to wait, it can kind of go sideways for him. So to create his own rhythm, you see guys like Dame do that. You see guys like Donovan Mitchell do that. Gradey, I wonder, even though those guys are both one-motion shooters, Gradey, I really wonder about. But from Kieran Doyle says, I don't know if this is a measurable or recorded thing, but it feels like the number of possessions that the Raptors have a secondary action or run 2 things the same possession, Spain into a cut, into another cut, or skip stuff doesn't come off into. Okay. Anyway, basically, this question is asking, are the Raptors running a ton of stuff? A whole bunch of stuff? The answer is yes. The Raptors run a continuous motion offense. They start out a ton of possessions in pistol, delay, some in horns, but basically the Raptors are constantly running. And if you watch Gradey, who was also, in addition to being the most voluminous cut user or screen user in the NBA, he is one of the highest, most well-traveled players in the NBA. He's a guy who's constantly running around the court, dragging, pulling the defense everywhere. It's not just him, though. There's a whole bunch of players in the NBA, on the Raptors, who are being involved in a ton of actions. Like Ochai Agbaji is in a million different things. Jakob Poeltl is in a million different things. Jakob is more closely tied to, he's more closely tied to the main action a lot of the time. But this Raptors team, they run a whole heap of action. Now, I know somewhere they do record this stuff. However, Kieran, I'm very sorry that I didn't grab them. I wasn't able to find them. However, I hope the Gradey number, 177 off-ball screens used, sates. And I will say that the Raptors, they are a team, I don't have the numbers, but will hopefully trust my eye test. This is a team that uses a bunch of different screens. Even it'll come out in the video tomorrow, but the Raptors, they have 5 different entries into Spain. As you were saying, Kieran, like the Raptors run a flare into Spain. They run a ghosted screen into Spain. They run a ghosted Chicago action into Spain. They'll just bring Gradey from the corner for Spain leak. Like they have so many different variations of every single play. So that's been really fun to see. And they can put so many different guys in positions, and they will be able to do that, especially once Emmanuel comes back, especially once Scotty comes back, because Gradey, what he's been doing so far is occupying the role that Quickly had in a lot of these plays. And in a lot of cases, actually been scoring more efficiently, to Tim's point, more voluminously out of those plays than IQ was. This is like pretty fun. We have a couple. Top Shot Tesla donates $4, $2 twice, says Agua, we ain't got no sting in Agua, and says, do you think Gradey will be better than Yiji and Leon? Yes, I do think Gradey will be better than Yiji and Leon, and Agua, we ain't got no stinking Agua. I'm not sure. Is that No Country for Old Men? Is that when Llewellyn opens up the door and he's like, Agua, I ain't got no stinking Agua? If I'm remembering correctly. I love that movie so much. Daggum. Okay. What else are we going to talk about? Jamie has here's a two-part question from two different people. Jamie says, RJ, Quick, and Gradey are neutral to negative defenders today. Do we have hope that they can improve enough over the coming years to be 3 out of 5 starters on a championship team? And then Ben Chapman says, what is the benefit of the Raptors are supposed to be getting from the additional ball pressure that they currently aren't? And is the juice worth the squeeze with the personnel? They've been even worse relative to the league in the half court than in overall defense. So these are pretty interesting questions. RJ, I feel, I've talked about this with Trey. RJ, I feel the least confident in him becoming a positive defender. He has a lot of the limitations defensively that Gradey does with like the foot speed stuff, without any of the inclination or want to like predict and get into places. Like RJ, I don't want to be down on RJ. RJ's game, anybody can go back, even from the live stream where myself, Trey, and S talked about it. The moment he got traded to the Raptors, I've been very positive RJ. I thought I saw more there than what we were seeing. And that was correct. RJ deserves a lot of love. Defensively, he's been bad. And he's been bad defensively for a long time. And he has to be, if he wants to be a positive defensively, he has to do a lot of the things that Gradey does with the muscular body that Gradey doesn't have. He has to get to spots. He has to be aggressive on digs. He has to want to be in the mix defensively, and he has to be pay like a little bit more attention to the scout. And he doesn't really do that often. Quickly, I mean, had a reputation as like a plus guard defender. AG says 1% steal rate and 0% block rate is so insane for a decently athletic 6'6" guy. Yeah. He's RJ is not trying to create turnover or defensive change that often, I would say. Quickly had that reputation as a plus defensive guard. To me, Dan Favale, we talked about it before the season. He thought when he was watching New York that Quickly wasn't just like a unique off-ball guard who played, fun off-ball defense, but he was a positive on-ball defender. He and I disagreed on that. And it's okay to disagree, by the way, as long as you're nice. Some things you don't want to disagree on. Some things are bigger than disagreement. But like basketball, just be nice. Don't be like a disingenuous ass or something like that. Dan and I disagreed on that. I thought Quickly was very poor as an on-ball defender with the Raptors. And I went back to watch some of the Knicks stuff, and I thought, yeah, this seems like he's maybe being overrated a bit defensively because he's on a very good defensive team and he doesn't have the hardest assignments all the time. That was my take. However, it's easy to see how quickly he's quite fleet of foot. He is long. He isn't a small guard. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He is a guy who you can see why it would make sense for him to become an above average defender, at least above neutral. That means the same thing. Why would I even quibble? It's easy to see how Quickly can do that. He just has to do that. And maybe once the team is healthy and there's more buy-in, that becomes something he's able to do. I do think he has pretty good like chops as an off-ball defender. However, this is a backcourt with RJ Barrett and Gradey Dick in it. Emmanuel quickly, unless he's playing with Davion Mitchell, which is something I'm excited for, unless he's playing with Davion Mitchell, he's going to be taking the hardest guard assignment. Maybe Scotty takes it every once in a while. I don't know. Maybe Mobo takes it every once in a while. I don't know. Jakob was guarding Russell Westbrook in the game the other day. There's always something, but quickly really has to bring it on ball. He hasn't yet, but you can see why it might work. Gradey, I made the case. RJ have made the case before too. If the Raptors end up getting good and RJ's on the team and their defense gets good, people will decide that RJ has actually improved, and the Raptors will be able to hide him on like post-up initiators and stuff like that because he's so strong. It's what happened with DeMar. It's what happened with Harden. People railed on those guys endlessly. Then they played on good teams, and suddenly they said like, well, he's actually used in this unique situation, which is fun. It's happening with Halliburton right now. Like the Pacers have a unique zone where they like to put him at the bottom to keep him away from all the above the break actions. And so maybe it'll come around and people will say, well, you know what? Halliburton is coming around defensively. Coaches can always use workarounds. But do I think RJ, Quick, and Gradey would be 3 out of 5 starters on a championship team? Probably not. But that's okay. It's really hard to be a championship team. The Raptors have one. They've done it once, and it took a lot to get there. And a lot of teams in the NBA have never done it once, despite bringing very many good teams together. And to Ben's question about, is the juice worth the squeeze? I talked about this with Trey on the last episode of Pull Up Trey, and to make another Pacers comparison, when I talked to Rick Carlisle and we were talking about like nexting and peel switching and how much of the defense in the NBA is about like keeping the ball in front and doing a lot of the rotational work behind and just being able to like, hey, keep your defense together and scramble somewhere else. Make guys beat you like with really great passing, or especially since, you know, there's a lot of guys in the NBA who got used to, you know, standing in the corner or just being like a spaced out 3-point shooter. There's a lot of guys in the NBA who still don't cut that well, which is why I love great cutters, because everybody uses like, oh, spacing. If you shoot 39% from 3 and it's because you hit catch and shoot jumpers, but like you just wait for the ball to meet you, I'd much rather a guy who shoots 36% from 3 and will cut against pressure all the time. That's way better. So there's a lot of guys who leave meat on the bone, and these types of switches, peel switching, nexting, they're very susceptible to well-timed cuts against them. Only the reason why they work is because a lot of guys in the NBA don't cut as much as they should. So I think, and to the point, what Rick said was he thought the next step in the NBA defensively was guarding your man. That's what he thought. That's why he was, and honestly, like that's always the next step. And then the next season, the Pacers had a guard your yard mentality where they played less help defense than like every other team in the NBA. They just asked their guys to stick that guy, stick on your man, defend your check. So I think that what the Raptors are doing is not the ideal way that they're supposed to play. But however, they have a lot of players like RJ, like Gradey, like IQ, who maybe need a little bit of like, hey, come on, bring the noise defensively and let's see where that gets you. I think this type of, it's that classic idiom, or I don't know if it's an idiom, example of, you know, it's easier to reel a guy back in than it is to like turn a guy, like get a guy going or something, right? That's playing this high pressure defense. I think they're trying to, you know, instill that ethic in the roster overall. I don't think this sticks around forever. And by the time this team is really, really good, I don't think the defense will look like it does now, if I had to guess. Hoops Nor Harm says, how do you know so much about the Pacers? I am doing a little bit of coverage on the Pacers this season for Caitlin Cooper's Patreon. I covered the Pacers playoff run last season with Caitlin Cooper, and that's basically it. I think Caitlin Cooper is the like best basketball analyst in the whole world. I consider myself lucky to be able to work with her, and by osmosis, I learn about the Pacers, and she will say that she learns about them from me as well, although I think it's more of a one-sided thing. There's a couple questions here in chat. Tim Waring says, can the Raptors be a good defensive team with RJ, IQ, and Gradey starting together? Yes. Well, good. They can be top half, maybe. Mo says, is IQ better than Garland? I don't see the vision on him. This is funny because I had a tweet where when Garland's, his, let's say, value across the league was really low, where I said, like, yeah, the Raptors should trade for Garland. I think Garland is incredible. I think that he had really bad injury luck and he came back early and he didn't play well. There's a bunch of, like, ask a doctor. Your jaw strength is related to your strength everywhere else in your body. If you can't chew, you lose strength everywhere. You lose strength in your grip. You lose strength everywhere. He broke his jaw, had to have it, like, he really had to come back against it. And everybody basically was calling me a dumbass because they're like, we have IQ. Why would we need Garland? I think Garland is much better than IQ. And people can call me dumb. That's okay. But I watch both guys a lot. I think that Garland is a better guard. And I think it's like his playmaking, he might not get as many assists because the Cleveland offense isn't an assist farm like the Raptors is. Like Davion Mitchell can come into the Raptors and get like however many assists per game. Dennis Schroeder started off and was getting like 9-10 assists per game, right? Like this offense creates assists. If Darius Garland was in this offense, he'd have like 12 a game, something like that. He's also an incredible shooter. I love his floater game. So I think that Garland is better than IQ, but I hope that IQ reaches as good as I think Garland is. That would be really good. And also ND here says even his on-ball defense, I think, is quite underrated, better than Quickly on-ball as well. I agree. I think that Garland is an underrated on-ball pest. However, he's smaller than Quickly, so there's some stuff about, let's say, off-ball defense there. From Ian Finlayson says, also RR, says, what do you think the average basketball fan has to gain by becoming more familiar with tactics and X's and O's? What's the best way for people to learn? I think it isn't, well, what do you have to gain? My favorite podcast ever is Binge Mode by Mallory Rubin and Jason Concepcion. And why I loved Binge Mode was because it added so many things that I could enjoy. It added different layers to the media I really liked. When I watched Game of Thrones, they would have an episode that was highly curated where they knew the lore, they knew the motivations. They could talk about, like, their media literacy was so high, and they could talk about the different themes that were ongoing. They would talk about character motivation. They could just add so much substance to what I was invested in. And I loved that. I love when people are educated, thoughtful about what they watch, what they partake in. You don't have to be a GM or a scout to enjoy the NBA, but as far as knowing things, it adds to it. So if you, like, when I first started learning about X's and O's, it was in high school, because you're just playing, an okay level of basketball, learning what was going on. But it's rewarding, I think, and people say this to me all the time. It's the Leo meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he points at the screen. If you understand what's happening on the court, then, like, you can say, like, ooh, this is that. It's fun knowing things. And also, if you understand what's happening on the court, then you have a better understanding of what's working. Then you, like, just having a further understanding of things, to me, is good and is very much a reward. Like, of course it is, about anything. So what does the average basketball fan have to gain? They will know more. And the more you know about something, I think the more you get to enjoy it. And that's not to say, like, you don't have to know it. I know when I sit there and talk about X's and O's, it's not the most popular thing I could be doing. Like, trust me, I look at what is popular, and I know I could talk about that stuff, and it would be more popular. I don't want to talk about that stuff. I don't want to be like that, And some of the more popular stuff is not things where I'm like, oh, that's a shame. It's just like, nope, that's totally interesting for them. That's totally good. But I want to talk about this because I think it's interesting, and because I think it cultivates a listenership, a readership that, in my mind, is very conscientious, is very gracious, and is great to interact with. The only reason it's like, have you seen a live chat? Have you seen the streamers live chat? We've got a good one here. They get much worse. And I think it's because of what we talk about, and also nobody else is doing this. I think in the Toronto market, like, it's just me. Now, could other people do it? Like, could Blake do this stuff? Could Matt Bonner do this stuff as often as I do it? Sure, they could. But nobody really wants to do it that much, obviously. And like they have a wider audience that they're going to talk about basketball to in a more accessible way. It doesn't mean I'm the only one who can. I'm just the only one doing it at this frequency. So what you have to gain is more, and you get to appreciate more. And as somebody who, I mean, in my interests, like, the more personal, the more universal is the term, right? In my interests, I want to know things. I want to understand things. So that's why. What's the best way for people to learn? I mean, probably YouTube. Honestly, there are people who across the NBA do this kind of stuff. You will find so many different people who are thinking about the game in this way, and are willing to go through film work and to highlight what's happening and to teach it in a super accessible way. But I think I'll do if anybody remembers the famous Darko interview that he did where everybody learned about 0.5 offense and it became a big thing. He did it with basketball immersion, right? I'm going on basketball immersion to do like an episode on the Raptors offense at some point in time, but basketball immersion is like the truly nerdy stuff where it's talking about like coaching, implementing offense, all that. Like, that's what Darko's episode was about. There's a million people on YouTube they'll walk you through like what's happening on an NBA court. And it doesn't mean their word is like the law, and it doesn't mean they're right about everything, but they're showing you the framework of understanding from that point of view. So just YouTube. And I think this will be the last question I answer, or a quick one from Jamari DNB says, are you an NBA fan or analyst first? Do you have any allegiances to an NBA team? Which sports team in general do you irrationally not like? I dislike the Celtics. Yeah, I couldn't escape that one. Am I a fan or analyst first? I was a fan first. I grew up loving the Raptors, like really love this team. I think part of the problem some people had with my reaction pod was that I wasn't emotional enough. Like, I would say, like, I'd be like, damn, they lost. Here's why they lost. But I wouldn't be like freaking out about the fact that they're losing. I wouldn't be like really emotionally affected by what happened on the court. I would just say what happened. I'm trying to be a companion piece. I'm trying to kind of promote understanding of like, this is why they lost, all that kind of stuff. All that good stuff. Some people thought I was not emotional enough for that, and so there's definitely like my analysis. I try and keep like the fandom out of it to some degree. However, on Media Row, when I'm at the games, like, I celebrate good baskets, but from both teams. Like, I love basketball, man. But am I rooting for the Raptors every single game they play? Am I rooting for the Raptors, the outcome they most desire? Yes. Yes, 100%. Am I biased towards the Raptors? Yes, 100%. So my allegiance is to democracy, to the Republic. Yeah. To the Republic, to democracy, to the Raptors, I guess my allegiance would be. From Kevin O. Wilden says, my theory is that if the Raptors were league average in turnovers, they'd be a top 10 offense and defense. Who are / what is the main culprit for the Raptors turnovers? Okay, so, and actually, this is an interview that Darko did before he became a head coach as well. He talked about the beautiful game Spurs. And also Darko talked about the more passes you make, the more turnovers you're going to have. And he's absolutely correct. That's why Nick Nurse's Raptors, they pass not a lot, like not a lot. And why did they not pass a lot? Because they were trying to win the turnover battle, and because they thought like, well, if we just leave it up to our shot creators to like create an isolation or in pick and rolls, and we just try and flatten things out and keep the ball protected, we expect that our shot makers are talented enough to score at a healthy enough rate This really leaned on Pascal more than anybody else. And then our turnover differential, both in rebounding, transition, what we're able to, create chances for ourselves on the other end, that will win us the game. That was the Raptors' approach under Nick Nurse. And it meant that less passing. And guess what? The Raptors did not turn the ball over very much because they didn't pass a lot. You pass, you turn the ball over. The Raptors pass a ton, like a ton. The best passing team in most people's mind, I think, the beautiful game Spurs in 2014, they were so good. And people didn't talk about their turnovers that much, but they were 11th in the NBA in turnovers, which is it's crazy that they passed that much. It's crazy that they passed that much, and we're only 11th in the NBA in turnovers. But the reason why the Raptors turn the ball over so much is because they pass the ball a lot. Now, of course, giving the ball to Gradey Dick to create with a live dribble, you're going to get some turnovers. Like the Nuggets blitzed him, and it scared the hell out of him. Like it really scared the hell out of him. You're going to get some stuff like that, but would the Raptors be, top 10 in offense and defense? I don't think so. I think they could be top 10 in offense if they're healthy. And Tim Waring here says they turn the ball over a lot because they're young. Some of that too. Just young players trying to make plays, trying to do their thing. Jakob is actually turning the ball over a ton, to be honest. Like he's turning the ball over a ton, to be honest. And like his turnover percentage is pretty crazy. Yeah, but the Raptors, I think, could be, or ND says it here, they're 11th right now on offense. Yeah, this is what I said before the season. I said that the Raptors could be a top 10 offense, and I said I at least expected them to be in the top half. So, yeah, turnovers. Top 10 on defense, I disagree, Kevin. However, you're bang on about turnovers on offense. But, you can't really get, like, they make risky passes, they score on layups, like, that's what it is. AG says, what happened to respecting turnover economy in my city? Shake my head. Yeah. What happened? What have we lost ourselves? Oh, right. ND had a question. Yes. With Precious and Gary Trent Jr. now gone and about a month into the new season, who would you say are the top 3 best dressers on the squad, as well as who's the most audacious dresser on the team? Yeah. Great question. I am deeply saddened. There are two players who've complimented my outfits at games. OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. I tweeted about the one with Gary because it was a really good one. Very sad that both those guys are gone. However, Precious was the best dresser on the Raptors. To my eye, that version of the team. Precious was a great dresser, like really, really great. Okay. Who's the best? I think the most audacious dresser is currently the best dresser on the Raptors. I think it is Bruce Brown. Now, does Bruce Brown dress how I would dress? No. Have I worn a cowboy hat in the last year? Yes. Am I a prairie boy? No. I think Bruce is the best dresser because fashion is like curating your own thing. And Bruce isn't hopping on a wave. That guy is just like, I like cowboy culture. I want to be a cowboy sometimes. So he dressed like a daggone cowboy. Hell yeah. He wore last year with the Pacers, he wore a jumper, like a shorts jumper with cowboy boots. And he's got the guns. He's letting them ride. He's the best dresser. Second is Scotty. ND says, as an Albertan, gotta appreciate Bruce Brown fashion taste. Stampede forever. Yeah, it's well, we're both prairie boys then, ND. Like, obviously, I'm as aware of, how people dress as you do. Yes, big shout out to prairies. AG says he's the handlebar mustache part of fashion. Hell yeah. Before I shaved my head, my hair was down to my shoulders, and I had a handlebar mustache just because I was trying stuff, just because I was seeing what's going on. But I knew I was losing it, so I was like, okay, I better grow this out just to see what it looks like before it's gone. But I had a handlebar mustache for a little bit. It was an insane look. Truly, truly insane. But it is a fashion choice, the handlebar. Yeah. Anyway, YG7, I keep answering questions, but okay. So Blake says Bruce should have come to Casey Musgraves with me last night. Hell yeah, he should have. Blake Murphy has 3. Oh, at MO says it's not just you. Raptors as a team are 3rd in the NBA in points allowed by cuts. Yes. And I'll just explain why this is happening really quickly. When you have higher pickup points, when you are applying more ball pressure, you are more susceptible to 2 things. Drives downhill, meaning you have to obviously step in to help. When you step in to help, cuts immediately become viable, either from the 45, down the gut, Corey cuts, whatever, or from baseline. More cuts are available. That ball pressure means like you push out on somebody, they can back cut you. Anybody who's played basketball knows that. That's a big thing that's happening. And that's, you can see that both in the on-ball defense and the off-ball defense. That's the cutting thing. And then Blake also says it's not fashion related, but Darko also pointed out how much more muscular Samson looks this year versus last year. Yeah, and same with Peace. When I was at the game, I was like, hell yeah. When Darko told me I look jacked, and it was like, are you lifting? Dude, that put me on another planet, man. I was like, now, of course, I say that. People are going to think I'm in the bag for Darko. Well, anyway, but I'm not. He just said I look jacked, and I was very appreciative. Matt Utley says, did you ever experience a man bun? No, I did not. Exodus Bay says, why doesn't Damon Stoudemire get more Raptor love by the organization? He gets some. He was there on opening night. He was like an integral part of opening night. I don't know. I don't know how much you want him to be involved, but yeah. Coco says, Samson, you should take great climbing. The Raptors would not let anybody go climbing with me because I mean, I'd love to. I'd love to go climbing with anybody from the Raptors, but a lot of people get injured climbing like all the time, so it's not going to happen. All right. Blake adds some stuff that I didn't have. He says Damon is the head coach at Georgia Tech, so his availability isn't as high as some others. Correct. I'm saying correct like I knew that. I didn't even know. So yeah, that makes sense. And then one final thing, YG7, because there's a couple things being commented on. YG7 says, at what point do we start to question the defensive schemes of the coaching staff? We were not a good defensive team with Pascal, OG, Precious, Dennis, Yak. When you're bottom of the league in defense, who's the most important guy? Okay, so, and then ND Talks Ball is adding like Pascal hasn't been that great. OG half quit. Like, yeah, the Raptors weren't a good defensive team. And, the Raptors weren't a good defensive team. And Pascal, this is what I warned Caitlin about and her Pacers listeners about when Pascal went over there. I was like, hey, the Pascal stuff, if the last thing you watched was the playoffs, especially like the bubble playoffs or something like that, where he was truly one of the best defenders in the league, and there were some stretches he had during the 2021-22 season, even a little bit during the 2022-23 season where you could see it ratcheted up. That's not the case. Pascal had checked out defensively. Even OG had checked out defensively. So, and like Jakob, his ability to contain stuff on the ball has changed. The Raptors were a collection. It's like a Yankees lineup. I know they just made the World Series, but like how a Yankees lineup, you can see there's like 4 guys in it who were like massive. They have massive contracts from other teams. They're a little bit over the hill. They come to the Yankees and the name is huge, but the impact might not really be there. The Raptors for a while there had, I think, big defensive names who are not providing big defensive impact. And that is also what's happening with like Miles Turner. Miles Turner hasn't been a positive defender for a while, but he's still people. If he had started the season getting like 3 blocks a game, people would have been like, well, is he in the, defensive player of the year? Just because names are names, right? The Raptors, they fell from grace. Do you question the schemes? YG7, if you heard the start of this podcast, I really went deep on what schemes the Raptors are running. So I tried to address that as best I could. But there's lots of stuff there. Probably a bigger deep dive on the defense than you'll get anywhere else, I think. Coco says, isn't that how S got injured? That is how S got injured. Yes, S got injured bouldering. I've never sustained a climbing injury. Thank goodness. I thank goodness for that. Lucky. Or maybe some of it is just about like making sure you know how to land and like disperse your kinetic energy. It was a class called Kinesiology 150. It's where I learned how to backflip and then later on broke my hand doing a backflip because somebody walked under me. But I also learned how to land properly in that class, which I think helps the climbing and bouldering in particular, because you fall off the wall. Other climbing, you have a rope, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, nobody cares about my bouldering. Blake says, bro, didn't you say last question 20 minutes ago? Take a sip. Yeah. I think that's a podcast. I will go and timestamp this and upload this to the podcast apps. Thank you so much. Like the video. There's like 120 people in here. I know you're listening. Like the video. There should be 120 likes on this daggum episode. All right. And it helps spread it out to other people. Comment for the algorithm, all that good stuff. We used to have shame about doing that. I remember watching YouTube in like 2015 asking for likes. Everybody's like, oh, dude, I can't believe you did that. But now we've completely fallen to the algorithm and we're like, hey, please help us. We're trying to game the game, you know? So that's my plea to you. Please help us game the game over at Raptors Republic. We have S on board now more than ever, who's trying to help us grow this thing. It's been growing immensely over the past however long. Thanks for listening. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you got into this in the morning or at night. Have a blessed day, and goodbye.